Living in London on $2,000 a month sounds impossible. Everyone knows the city swallows money faster than you can earn it. Rent alone can eat your entire budget before you've bought a single overpriced sandwich. But here's what the headlines skip over. There are actual neighborhoods in this city where $2,000 a month isn't just survivable, it's comfortable. Not the London you see in postcards, but real places where real people live without choosing between heating and eating. Let's start in Barking and Dagenham, all the way out in East London. This borough has a reputation problem. People hear the name and think urban decay, but the numbers tell a different story. You can rent a one-bedroom flat here for around £700 a month. That's roughly $850. Add another $150 for utilities, $70 for a monthly travel card to get into central London, and you've still got over half your budget left for food, entertainment, and actually living your life. Barking has direct tube access on the District line. The journey to the city takes about 40 minutes, which is less time than some people in Manhattan spend getting to work. The high street has been getting investment. New cafes are opening. The park along the River Roding is genuinely pleasant on a summer afternoon. Is it trendy? Absolutely not. Will your friends from university be impressed when you tell them where you live? Probably not. But will you be able to save money while living in one of the world's greatest cities? Yes. Next, we have Abbey Wood. For decades, this was just the forgotten end of the line in southeast London. But the arrival of the Elizabeth line changed the math forever. You can still find one-bedroom flats here for around £800, but now you're connected to Canary Wharf in 11 minutes. It's a neighborhood of two halves, the post-war estates and the lush greenery of Lena's Abbey Woods. It's one of the few places left where you can actually hear birds instead of sirens, while still being a 20-minute train ride from the skyscrapers. It's affordable, it's green, and it's arguably the most undervalued stop on the entire Crossrail map. If you're still here and you haven't hit subscribe, I admire your stubbornness, but hit the button now, because the city at the top of this list is a ghost town in the making. We're talking about sellers who are desperate, agents who have given up, and price cuts so deep they're bleeding. If you want to see the real face of the London crash before everyone else starts talking about it, you need to be subscribed. Croydon sits in South London, and for years it's been the punchline of London geography jokes. But something shifted. Croydon has the best transport connections of any outer London borough. You've got trams, overground trains, and the Southern Railway main line that gets you to Victoria in 15 minutes. Rent for a studio flat runs about £800 monthly. Factor in bills and transport, and you're looking at around $1,200 total before groceries. The town centre got a massive renovation. Box Park Croydon brought in street food vendors and independent shops. The arts scene is growing faster than most people realize. Small galleries are popping up in converted industrial spaces. Live music venues that can't afford Shoreditch rents are moving here instead. The locals will tell you Croydon has an edge that sanitized central London lost decades ago. Whether that edge appeals to you depends entirely on what you're looking for. Woolwich in southeast London used to be a Royal Artillery garrison town. The military left, and for a while the area struggled to find its identity. Then Crossrail happened. The Elizabeth line turned Woolwich into a zone with 20-minute access to Canary Wharf and 30 minutes to the West End. Property developers noticed. The waterfront got regenerated. But here's the thing about regeneration. It hasn't pushed prices into the stratosphere yet. A one-bedroom flat near the Arsenal still goes for around £750 a month. The covered market sells vegetables cheaper than any central London supermarket. Turkish bakeries line the main road selling fresh bread for pennies. The Riverside Walk stretches for miles, and on weekends, the Thames barrier becomes an unlikely picnic destination. Woolwich feels like a neighborhood in transition, which means you get the benefits of investment without the costs that come 5 years later. Tottenham appears on this list, and some people will immediately close this video. The reputation precedes it. But reputation lags reality by about a decade in London property. Yes, Tottenham had problems. It still has challenges. But the area around Tottenham Hale has transformed so dramatically that long-time residents barely recognize it. Rent for a flat near the station runs £800 monthly. The Victoria Line puts you in the West End in 20 minutes. The Overground connects to East London. The new development around the Hale brought in proper restaurants, a cinema, and coffee shops that don't serve instant. The Walthamstow wetlands sit right on the border, offering more green space than most Londoners see in a month. Seven Sisters Market, just down the road, is an actual cultural experience rather than a tourist trap. You can eat Colombian, Ghanaian, Polish, and Vietnamese food all in one afternoon for less than 20 quid. The football stadium brings energy on match days. The area has grit, but grit means authenticity in a city increasingly scrubbed clean for investors who never actually live there. Edmonton in North London rarely makes any list except lists of places to avoid. That's precisely why it works on a budget. Rent here drops to £650 for a decent one-bedroom. Nobody is competing with you for flats because nobody dreams of telling people they live in Edmonton. The Silver Street area near the river has parks that feel genuinely peaceful. The North Circular creates noise, but double glazing exists for a reason. Edmonton Green Shopping Centre won't win design awards, but it has everything you actually need. The supermarkets are cheap. The bus connections are extensive. You can get to central London, or you can get to cheaper areas with more space. The strategy here is simple. Live somewhere nobody wants to live, save the difference, and use the money you're not spending on rent to actually enjoy London. Go to museums, see shows, eat at restaurants in other neighborhoods. Your flat is just where you sleep. The entire city is what you're paying for. Erith sits so far east it's almost in Kent. The train from Erith to London Bridge takes 35 minutes, which is less than some people living in trendy Hackney spend on their commute. You can rent a two-bedroom house here for £900 a month. Not a flat, a house, with a garden. The town centre looks tired, but the riverside path is surprisingly well maintained. Crossrail is coming, which means property prices will eventually climb, but they haven't yet. The local Morrison's sells groceries at prices that would make a Waitrose shopper weep. Erith has a working-class history that it hasn't tried to rebrand into something marketable. That lack of pretension translates directly into lower costs. The people who live here aren't performing for Instagram, they're just living. If you can handle being far from the action and comfortable with a neighborhood that doesn't appear in Time Out London, Erith offers something rare: space and affordability in a city famous for providing neither. Thamesmead occupies a special place in London's consciousness. It's the brutalist housing estate that appeared in A Clockwork Orange. The architecture is uncompromising. Concrete towers and elevated walkways dominate the landscape. Some people find it dystopian. Others find it fascinating. Rent runs around £700 for a one-bedroom. The lakes throughout the estate create an odd serenity. Swans and ducks seem unbothered by the concrete surroundings. The bus connections are solid. Abbey Wood station provides Elizabeth Line access. Thamesmead won't be for everyone. The aesthetic is challenging, but for someone who appreciates modernist architecture or just wants remarkably cheap rent while staying within London proper, it delivers. The community here is tight. People look out for each other in ways that disappeared from wealthier neighborhoods decades ago. You won't find artisanal coffee shops, but you will find actual community centers where actual neighbors actually interact. Dagenham deserves its own entry separate from Barking. The Heathway area in particular offers flats for £600 monthly. That's cheaper than most university accommodations. Dagenham gets dismissed as suburban nothing, but the tube runs here. The district line might be slow, but it's reliable. Parslows Park is massive and genuinely beautiful in spring. The housing is primarily post-war estates, which means the architecture isn't winning awards, but the space is generous. Dagenham's biggest advantage is that nobody is trying to gentrify it. No developers are building luxury flats marketed to overseas investors. No trendy restaurants are driving up the cost of a simple meal. It's just a functional London neighborhood where working people live affordable lives. Sometimes boring is exactly what a budget needs. Peckham almost didn't make this list because it's gotten too popular. But if you know where to look, deals still exist. The areas further from Rye Lane, away from the galleries and rooftop bars, still have flats around £850 monthly. You get the overground and multiple bus routes. You get actual culture without the Shoreditch price tag. Peckham Library is an architectural landmark. The market sells produce at prices supermarkets can't match. The nightlife scene rivals anywhere in London. Living slightly outside the center of Peckham's coolness means you access everything that makes the area desirable while avoiding the rent inflation that coolness creates. It requires research and timing, but it's possible. For now, housing in London operates on perception as much as reality. These 10 areas work because they've been overlooked, dismissed, or misunderstood. The city's most expensive neighborhoods weren't always expensive. Notting Hill was rough 50 years ago. Shoreditch was derelict 30 years ago. Today's forgotten borough is tomorrow's next big thing. The trick is getting in before perception shifts. Once a neighborhood gets labeled the next hotspot, prices follow immediately. Investors arrive before the coffee shops do. By the time your friends admit the area might actually be decent, you're already priced out. Which brings up an uncomfortable truth about cheap London rent. You're often trading money for time or comfort, or both. That £600 flat in Dagenham means longer commutes. The £800 place in Erith means fewer restaurants within walking distance. There's no magic neighborhood offering Notting Hill amenities at barking prices. Anyone claiming otherwise is selling you something. But here's what nobody mentions in those articles about London's housing crisis. The expensive neighborhoods aren't actually that much better for daily living. A flat in Kensington costs 3 times what you'd pay in Woolwich, but your actual day-to-day existence isn't 3 times better. You still commute to work. You still buy groceries. You still come home tired and watch television. The fancy postcode doesn't fundamentally alter those realities. What it does alter is how you feel about where you live, and that's worth examining, honestly. Some people need to live somewhere they're proud to put on their address. Others genuinely don't care as long as the tube works and the flat doesn't leak. Neither approach is wrong, but only one of them works on a tight budget. The neighborhoods on this list share something beyond low rent. They're all in transition. London never stops changing. The city that existed 10 years ago isn't the city that exists today, and today's city won't exist in 10 years. These areas are caught in that process right now. Some will gentrify and price out the people who live there currently. Others will remain stubbornly resistant to change. Predicting which is basically impossible. What you can predict is that living in any of these places requires a certain flexibility. The new American diner opening in Croydon probably won't match the one in Soho. The vintage shop in Thamesmead definitely won't compare to what you'd find in Shoreditch. You're pioneering, whether you wanted to be a pioneer or not. Some people thrive on that. They enjoy discovering the good Pakistani restaurant before it gets reviewed. They like knowing the bartender at the local pub because there's only one local pub. They appreciate having actual conversations with neighbors instead of the polite silence that defines expensive areas where everyone's too busy or too important to chat. Other people find it exhausting. They want the infrastructure already built. They want options and variety and the certainty that comes from living somewhere fully developed. Both responses are valid, but only the first type of person should move to these neighborhoods. Here's something else worth considering. London's geography means even the furthest zones connect to the center faster than suburbs in other cities connect to their centers. Croydon to Leicester Square takes 40 minutes. That's nothing compared to commutes in Los Angeles or Atlanta or Houston. The tube and overground network means nowhere is truly isolated unless you need it to be. The psychological distance matters more than the actual distance. Living in Zone 5 feels far because we've been conditioned to think anything past Zone 2 is basically Scotland. But Zone 5 is still London. You're still in the city. The rental savings let you actually enjoy what the city offers instead of spending everything on rent and staying home because you're broke. People who insist on Zone 1 locations often end up living in shoebox studios, eating meal deals for dinner, never going out because they've got nothing left after rent. Meanwhile, someone in Barking lives in a proper one-bedroom, cooks actual meals, and has money for theater tickets. Who's really experiencing London? The class dimension can't be ignored either. These cheaper areas are where working-class Londoners actually live. The diversity is real, not the performed diversity of expensive neighborhoods, where everyone's actually upper middle class, but from different countries. You hear multiple languages on the bus. The schools reflect actual London demographics, instead of whoever could afford the catchment area. That matters if you care about living in a real city instead of an expensive bubble. It also means dealing with real city problems. Crime exists. Not everywhere, not constantly, but it exists in ways that neighborhoods with private security don't experience. Littering is more common. Street maintenance is slower. The council doesn't prioritize these areas because the people who live here don't have the political connections to demand priority. $2,000 a month in London isn't a fantasy budget for trust fund kids slumming it. It's a real number that works in real places if you're willing to live where the Instagram photographers aren't. These 10 neighborhoods prove the city hasn't completely priced out normal humans yet. The catch is, you have to actually want to live in London more than you want to brag about your postcode. If you found this useful, subscribe because we cover London like this every week.